wait till the presentation starts. Thank you very much. As was said in the introduction, I'm Paola García. I'm Vice President for Foreign Direct Investment in ProColombia. Let me tell you a bit about ProColombia. We are the promotion agency of the country, and we promote Colombia in three main aspects. We promote exports from Colombia to international markets. We promote tourism from international markets to Colombia. And the reason why we are here, we promote foreign direct investment. So we are here to tell you about the good news of Colombia. You have heard during the past speeches that we are going through a very exciting moment in our country, and we expect to have more British business coming to Colombia every day. As you have heard, we are a striving economy. Basically, we have expectations to grow at 3.5% of our GDP. Our foreign direct investment is also booming. As a matter of fact, we closed the first quarter of 2019 with a growth of 68% with regards to the past year. So there's a lot of good news to tell. Let's talk a bit about innovation. Colombia is becoming the innovation hub of Latin America, and I would like to tell you why this is happening. Basically, we have outstanding startups that have called the attention not only of local, but of international venture capital funds and angel investors. We are also going through business reinvention. Colombian business is getting up to date to be able to move into the digital era. And of course, we have heard before during this session, we have our first unicorn, Rappi. Many of you have heard about Rappi all day long, but maybe I should explain a bit about what it is so that you can understand a bit about it. Rappi is an application. It is a company that was born in 2015 that developed an application. Basically, what this application provides is delivery service of a broad scope of goods and services that are brought to you to make your life easier. So you can shop through Rappi, you can buy your groceries through Rappi, you can buy any of the medicines that you need through Rappi, but you can also ask Rappi to bring you cash to your doorstep if you need cash, for instance. And they have been receiving foreign direct investment. First, they received $200 million from Y Accelerator from Silicon Valley. And as you heard, this year we had the great news of SoftBank investing $1 billion into this startup. They will be expanding their operations into 7 countries in Latin America. So they are present in Colombia, but they will be expanding to Mexico, Chile, Peru, Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay as well. So this is one of the latest news that we have in our country that shows the positive impact of foreign direct investment and how international companies are seeing the opportunity of Colombia currently. We also have the latest technologies arriving to our country. We are seeing innovation awards not only from the public sector, but from the private sector as well. We also have more academic offerings on innovation programs, so we are seeing curriculums including things such as artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, blockchain, design thinking, for instance. So we're trying to scope up all of this environment to make startups feasible. Laboratories and innovation factories, and we're having several discussions, as the one we are having today, to be able to make opportunities available for companies and be able to make the matchup for these opportunities. So basically, the Colombian government, as you heard, has this very basic equation that says that legality plus entrepreneurship equals fairness. So we are here for the entrepreneurship part, mainly. International companies will help us scale up, creating the terms for companies to grow and establish themselves. We are trying to generate clusters so that companies with a joint strategic vision can come together to innovate and transform. And we're also obviously very open to innovation through corporate entrepreneurship and business development. So we wanted to create a cluster with scaled up terms. So we started as a government going to the world to see which were the big success cases. And we found a big success case in France, which is called Station F. Basically, Station F is the largest campus for startups in the world. And we decided to speak to them to get to know the model and to be able to apply it to Colombia. This is where Se Emprende programs begins. Basically, Se Emprende is a program that will be handled by Impulsa, which is the innovation entity of the Ministry of Commerce, Industry, and Tourism. And we will see that Se Emprende will be key to the integration of all players of this ecosystem as a key to success. It will be in charge of the attraction and development of talent to these centers. And as you can see in the map, it will be all across the country. It will not only be in Colombia, it will be in the regions. I usually repeat this, but Colombia is a country of regions. If you go to Latin America, you will probably see that most of the countries base most of their economy and their operations in one capital city and perhaps a secondary city. That's not the case in Colombia. We are a country of regions. We have more than 5 cities of more than 1 million inhabitants, and we have more than 10 cities of more than 500,000 inhabitants. So this makes us have various poles of development, and this will be the case for Se Emprende. We will have the hub in Bogota, but you can see that we will be across the country. This Se Emprende program will have some strategic guidelines. We will be focusing on several subjects. One of them is artificial intelligence. Another one is creative industries, the orange economy that President Duque is so keen on, and that is very important for our economy. Orange economy accounts for more than 2% of our GDP. This is more than what mining and what coffee accounts for in our economy. GovTech, because of course we want public entities to be developing as well and getting into the digital era. Stabilization of companies, and sectors such as health, education are very important to be developed in Se Emprende centers. FinTech, recently, just yesterday, we were named like the #1 country in Latin America to apply FinTech. So I think this is great news as well, and it will be within the Se Emprende centers. And finally, renewable energies. I think it's important to mention that Colombia, more than 70% of the energy comes from hydropower, and we are trying to diversify. Why would we want to diversify our energy matrix? Because basically, we don't want to have all of our eggs in the same basket. We are a tropical country, and we have dry seasons and rainy seasons. Every time we come to a dry season, we start to struggle and sweat and think that we're going to have a power shortage. So the government has put in place some incentives to develop renewable energy, such as solar and wind power. As was mentioned by President Duque, we are now the 5th Center for the 4th Industrial Revolution. This is a World Economic Forum initiative. The headquarters are in San Francisco. They have another operation in China, Japan, India, and the 5th one is going to be opened, it has been opened recently in Medellin, to be able to work on artificial intelligence solutions, Internet of Things, and blockchain. And of course, we have to be open to innovation. We want to put the startup, scale-ups, the entrepreneurship part of the equation quite in the middle of this ecosystem, but we need a lot of entities and factors to come together to make the ecosystem work. So we need universities, chambers of commerce, hacker spaces, research centers, media, big corporations, governments, service providers, equity funds, multilateral companies. We all have to come together to be able to develop the innovation ecosystem of Colombia. And many companies are already being a part of this. They're being part of the business life cycle of startups. As you can see here, we have several public and private players in the incubation, acceleration, venture capital, and cooperation part. We would like to invite British investors to come into this ecosystem and give us a hand to be able to build the innovation ecosystem of Colombia as it is going. We want to add more actors into this process. We know that international funding is key to getting these startups to develop and to get into the expansion phase. So we invite you to work with ProColombia. We have an office here in London that can assist you and show you the different opportunities and projects where you can invest in Colombia, in this innovation ecosystem. And basically, well, the president said it all. I mean, it's difficult to speak after him because he gave us 2 main messages. Colombia is open to business, and Colombia never stops. So I think this is very important to mention and to be able to invite you to come. And to end, I would like to end with some success stories. The case of Amazon, which recently established the Center for Customer Service in Colombia, employing 800 people and wanting to reach up to 2,000 people. In a recent event they had in Bogota in March, they announced further investments in solid infrastructure for the Amazon operation for the region. WeWork, which provides these co-working spaces that also are like food for the ecosystem, And finally, the case of Rappi with the recent investment of SoftBank. Just for general knowledge, SoftBank is the largest investor in the world. They are the largest investor in China, the largest investor in India, and the largest investor in the United States. And now they have decided to come into Colombia to help some of our startups become unicorns and continue to succeed. So thank you very much. We hope that this is a broad overview of the dynamic that is going on in Colombia, and I guess the floor goes to the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank all the allies that are here today that helped ProColombia and the Colombia Stock Exchange organize this event. And for the first time, our two institutions are joining forces to make the Inside-Out the largest platform for promoting Colombia in the UK and Europe. Thank you all for your support. Thank you, Juan Pablo, for believing in this, and for all the attendees for participating in this session. We believe this is a fantastic opportunity for all of you to learn more about Colombia and the exciting investment opportunities that our country has to offer. As you have heard from President Duque and all our experts and speakers this morning, we believe that Colombia is going through a transformation. This is a key moment in time, and we are here to invite you to be part of this process. Colombia is ready for you. We have a great panel today that I'm very pleased to present, will help us shed light on the rapid development of entrepreneurship and innovation that we are witnessing in Colombia. A great example of this is the recent investment that we have mentioned several times today, $1 billion made by SoftBank Innovation to fund Rappi, one of the most innovative Colombian enterprises with operations in 6 Latin American countries. Other examples are the arrival of the first Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution that we are very proud to mention several times too, which shows Colombia as the first Latin American Spanish-speaking country to have one of these centers for technology and innovation. And also Amazon Web Services shows Colombia as their center of operations to provide services worldwide in Spanish, English, and Portuguese 24/7. These are some of the examples. Let me introduce you to the panelists. Mr. Martin Diaz Plata, Managing Partner of Capital Group, Mr. Efraín Forero, CEO of Davivienda Bank, and Mr. Juan Pablo Córdoba, CEO of the Colombian Stock Exchange. Thank you all for joining us here today. As we mentioned, entrepreneurship as a key growth factor of the Colombian economy has attracted the interest of private equity funds. Martin, from the Capital Group, can you share with us how has been the experience of Capital Group in Colombia and its participation in the expansion of the D1 supermarkets, the largest hard discount retailer in our country?
Okay, certainly. We are part of a global asset management organization called the Capital Group, which invests in listed securities around the world, mainly equities and bonds, but we have also a private equity effort in emerging markets. We have invested in emerging markets for over a quarter of a century. And our first investment in Colombia was in 1999, probably the worst year ever to invest in Colombia. In the last 30 years, we invested in Bancolombia, which was a very successful investment we sold 6-7 years later. Our last investment in Colombia was done 2.5 years ago, and we invested in hopefully, for all Colombians here, in a supermarket that you all been to, which is D1. D1, first of all, is not an application. It's a real supermarket chain. And last 2 weeks ago, in fact, we crossed over 1,000 stores. We are the first retailer ever in Colombia to have more than 1,000 stores. We follow the basic premises of what is called hard discount, which is 500 SKUs, 300 square meters, 80% private label, which we think has revolutionized food retail in Colombia. We are not only the largest hard discount in Colombia, but the largest hard discounter in Latin America. We're very pleased with that investment, and as Paola was saying, we are across all of geographies in Colombia, and just a data point, our best store in Colombia today is a store in Urabá. It has the highest sales per square meter in the country, and in 2 months we'll be entering the last region in which we are not present, which is Quibdó. So that's an idea of the success of the UNO. We're very pleased with this investment, but most importantly, we're very pleased with how Colombian people have reacted to it. Because hard discount, it sounds easy from the outside because it's a very simplistic model, but it requires discipline. And without the help of more than 10,000 employees that we know in Colombia, it would not have been possible.
Thank you, Martin. We have had the chance to interact today with several private equity funds. Most of them are looking for direct investment opportunities in our country, in Colombia, and also in the capital market. The next question is to Juan Pablo Córdoba, President of the Colombian Stock Exchange. Thanks again for partnering with us for the Colombian Inside-Out. Mr. Córdoba, foreign investors have about a 30% participation in the Colombian stock market. Can you tell us how has been the experience for foreign investors in our capital market so far?
Well, thanks for the question. I've been a true believer that Colombia offers great opportunities to foreign and international investors, and that the Colombian capital markets and Colombian enterprises and businesses can benefit from matching the foreign funds with the opportunities in Colombia. So the reason behind Colombia Inside-Out is precisely that one. We started 8 years ago to precisely go outside of Colombia to promote investment in Colombia, initially through the capital markets, but we've seen how capital is now flowing through different avenues, private equity funds, venture funds, entrepreneurship, etc. So we are open to all aspects of attracting investment. As you mentioned, when we started this venture, there was basically no investment in government securities, local government securities from international investors. And we had under 4% or so investment in the equity market. Today, both represent more than 30% in government securities. 30% of holdings are in hands of international investors, and more than 35% of daily trading in the equity market is done by international investors. I think the challenge here is to bring more opportunities to the markets, more opportunities to investors, because as we saw this morning, and we'll see probably throughout the day, there is a lot of interest in Colombia. There is a lot of interest in finding investable projects in Colombia, but we need to do this matching. I must recognize that the governments have encouraged this effort, and there have been adjustments to the tax system, for example, that have been key. Just last year, a further reduction in the withholding tax for international investors was approved. The dividend tax in Colombia is 50%. There's a 50% reduction in the dividend tax for international investors. So it's an investment environment that is very friendly to international investors, and will continue to work that way. So it's critical for us to continue to attract international investors, but I think that more importantly, I think international investors are showing the benefits of it by putting the money into Colombia.
Wonderful to hear. And last but not least, we need to acknowledge the rapid growth of Colombian entrepreneurship and the opportunities that revolve about technology and the Colombian startups. This really constitutes a great opportunity, not only for investors, but also for local Colombian partners. Mr. Efraín Forero, CEO of Davivienda, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you here today. Given the high volume of entrepreneurship in Colombia, in our country, how is your bank supporting new entrepreneurs? Can you share with us, can you tell us about the alliance between Davivienda and Rappi, our first unicorn?
Thanks, Flavia. And really it's a privilege and an honor to be here today talking to all of you. And well, we are really very excited about what we are doing with Rappi in Colombia. We are the third largest bank in Colombia, and we have been working since 6 years ago with the development of a platform that we call Plata, that is a digital platform that is offering 5 million customers the services related with the saving account. It is really a very strong platform that we have developed and that have teach us a lot. So we're working with Rappi so that we finally got an alliance in which we are going to use this platform so that all customers in Rappi, through Rappi Pay, will have the chance to enable the Rappi Pay and convert it in a saving account that is going to be managed by this platform, allowing all customers from Rappi to have the chance to make transfer, to do all payments of the things that they have in the app, to withdraw money from the ATMs, to do everything that they can do when they are in Davivienda. So now Davivienda and Rappi will work together so that customers will have the chance to do everything within the app, and Davivienda will become the financial vertical of this alliance, and customers will have the support, the reliability of Davivienda. The money is going to be in the bank and the different products that we are going to offer. Now we are offering just this, let's say, saving account, but we are going to offer customers with loans and with service related with insurance services as well in the coming months. So we have a lot of expectation about this alliance with Rappi. We expect to have the chance to grow by 2 million new customers for Plata. And at the same time, we expect to become the acquiring bank for those merchants, medium and small merchants, that are getting the benefits of Rappi, so that we also want to be the bank for them to provide them with financial services, with loans, and with the different services that they might have. Rappi is becoming this type of super app in which they believe they are going to give customers with many different types of services. But we want them to have also the opportunity, whenever they want, whenever they need, to have the financial services. So this is really a challenge. This is going to be very important for us. We expect to enable Plata to become a pretty much better digital bank that we can carry with a portable platform we can carry to other countries and to serve in other countries in Central America, or even in the countries in which we don't have presence, making alliance with local players to have a Davivienda that is becoming a digital bank, but as well a Plata platform that can move around the globe.
That's a Rappi opportunity, so
Yeah,
I am so pleased. Now, I would like to invite you to take a look over the future plans for expanding investment opportunities in Colombia. And I would like to start a question with Martin. Capital Group has been a long-time investor in several companies, as you mentioned, in diverse sectors within Colombia. From your perspective, which industry sectors do you currently see as the most attractive of investing in Colombia, in our country?
Okay. Well, as Capital Group, we will continue to invest in all sorts of listed securities, including stocks and not only corporate but sovereign bonds. Within private equity, we believe that you should always specialize in private equity. So it's very hard to create a platform where you invest in infrastructure and at the same time you're investing in consumption. In Latin America in general, the way I think about the investment landscape, I think about three basic activities. One is infrastructure, the second one is energy and commodities, and the third one is consumption. And what we are going to right now at Capital Group is that we're going to specialize in consumption. And consumption, it goes from retail, consumer retail and goods, restaurants, healthcare, education, everything that touches the consumer. And I'm probably the last person that's going to speak about consumption today because I saw the agenda, and it's obviously infrastructure, energy, those are big projects. And the beauty of consumption is that they start little. They start very small. They start as a very successful bakery chain in Cali that expanded throughout Valle del Cauca and then expanded into Pereira, and then it became national. It started in a small supermarket chain in Bucaramanga, and suddenly they opened a few, and it became a national change. So what we try to do is find these concepts of consumption and grow them and scale them. Because obviously having 5 supermarkets is different than having 1,000 supermarkets and different than having 3,000 supermarkets. And therefore, our role as investors is to scale these companies. What kind of companies? For example, in education, we see 2 sources of educational activities that offer big opportunities. One is preschool, and the second is vocational training. In healthcare, we don't typically invest in large-scale hospitals. We let that to the infrastructure guys. But we like things like dialysis centers, or emergency sectors, or dental clinics, things that you can scale very rapidly. And in restaurants, restaurants are concepts that also require scale. And we like QSR, what is called QSR, and casual dining, things that we like to, you like to have homogeneous formats that you can scale very rapidly. So I think that's where we are focused on the consumer sector. Colombia is 50 million people, is the 3rd largest consumer market in Latin America. It's one of the most heterogeneous markets, and that's where we will continue to invest.
Looking forward for that. And, the private sector is working hard to foster innovation in our country. Mr. Forero, you have shown a special interest in promoting entrepreneurship and the use of technology. How can entrepreneurs partner with your bank and with the banking sector to develop new line of businesses and promote innovation?
Well, we have been working with the innovation for a very long time, and we have had the chance to go through different places, to London, to different hubs in innovation, London, Israel, Silicon Valley, Madrid, Barcelona, and Singapore, and India. And in those places, I have to tell that we have got the support from ProColombia to find a way in which we can know this ecosystem and know how we can get very close to different type of startups and different type of companies that have allowed us to change our company more rapidly and in a much better way. We have been working as well in Colombia with many different startups and entrepreneurs. We have an accelerator. We have been working with other accelerators in the country and in the region, and we understand that there is a lot of knowledge. We understand that we have to have the best people inside our organization. However, that is not enough. We need to find best talent outside of our organization. And one way to do it is to try to help and support the entrepreneurs, different type of startups in our country. We have been in touch with more than 100 different startups in Colombia, and we have made so far deals, different type of partnership deals with more than 10 of them, and we will keep on working on that. But let me mention something that I think is one of the best ideas that we have developed in our group, the Bolivar Group, that recently sent a project, a prize for young people, for people studying at the universities. We wanted to invite them to participate in a competition in which they can present their projects related with social results, social impact, only social impact, because we believe all of these young people has a lot of commitment with improving the social problem in Colombia. Well, it was launched last year, and we got a fantastic result. We got the commitment of more than 25 universities around the country. And we finally got 800 different initiatives. And we got prizes for 10 of them. The ideas were really fantastic. Not were ideas, that were projects that were encouraged, that were working, and they were showed the results. It was really fantastic. We have a lot of talent in Colombia. We have very much talent there. We want to support them. We want them to work with us. We want to help them to protect their ideas, to make patents, to have the right effort to have the best result that we can with our people. So we really believe that is really very important. Now we are going to have this prize for the regions, and we have the presence in Central America as well with this prize. That was really a very nice idea and a very important idea for us that I wanted to share with you today.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Forero. And concluding our round of questions, Mr. Córdoba, what incentives you think should be implemented in order to have companies like Rappi and other unicorns companies get listed in the Colombian capital market?
Yeah, I think that one of the challenges that we're seeing, and as Efraín was mentioning, is how do we mobilize capital to these firms? I think what we're seeing in Colombia is a very hot fintech industry, very hot tech industry. There's a lot of talent, a lot of entrepreneurs that are out there putting together very, and as we saw with the case of Rappi, avant-garde initiatives that should be funded, and that probably in the traditional way of funding, they would not have access to capital. I think Colombia is opening up to that, and again, venture capital, private equity firms have played a big role there, but I think that the traditional capital markets have to open up much more to these types of firms. Aside from the obvious sectors of mining, energy, oil and gas, and infrastructure and consumer goods, I believe that Colombia is in the right spot at the right time with the technology industries, and that we need to fund these industries. And we welcome all efforts with the government, supervisory, regulatory bodies, etc., to make more flexible the funding environment for these types of firms, because they need to grow rapidly and they need to mobilize capital rapidly. So everything we do in that direction jointly with the government, I think, will be a very positive for Colombia, because we're, as I said, in the right spot at the right time, and we need to accelerate this process.
Thank you so much for partnering with us. And what we have seen today at this panel is the interest of both the public and the private sector on joining forces to promote entrepreneurship and innovation. We invite you to join us and see for yourselves how Colombia and our talent can contribute to your bottom line. The Colombian Stock Exchange and ProColombia are ready to assist you in any need you need for this purpose. And we would like now to open the panel for questions from the audience.
Hi, my name is Chris Bowman. I'm from Sterling Capital. It's a question to Mr. Forero. From what I understand, you want to try to move into a sort of banking platform. And I was just wondering what's your assessment of the threat by either TransferWise or Revolut in that model?
Well, I will have to tell you that we already have this, let's say, e-platform that already have 5 million customers. And it is offering all type of different services within Colombia. So if I have to compare with Revolut, I would say that it is already very similar to that, because it is offering all type of services. It has the chance also to have let's say, to buy an internet through an e-card, to make withdrawals in all the different ATMs in Davivienda, and withdraw from correspondent banks, about 13,000 correspondent banks, whenever they need cash. So they already have all the different services. Now we start offering them with microcredit, nano credits, and also with some insurance product in this platform. We have used the platform to pay subsidies from government. More than 1.5 million subsidies were paid every 2 months last year in government payments. It is used as well for many companies to make the payroll that they do very normally. So it is really already very important platform. But now with this alliance with Rappi and maybe with another alliance that we are going to work in the coming months, we will have the whole ecosystem, governments, companies, all Colombians, and as well merchants in this, tied to this platform, digital platform, that can be, as I mentioned, portable, and it can go to any other country, any other place, to serve Colombians when they are abroad, when they are in the States or here in London or wherever. They can use it as well to manage all the resources that they have, they send to their families in Colombia in a very much better way.
Another question? Here. Thank you.
Hi, this is James Goodwin, London Stock Exchange Group. I guess this one's for Juan Pablo. And obviously you want to attract those, the likes of Rappi or other technology companies to your market. Obviously the listing environment is key, and the funding, but what about the liquidity on the other side? Because I guess that's a key element, kind of having that investor buying into the market. So I'd just be interested to hear more about that.
Yeah, we definitely need to provide the right platform for the firms. And you're right, there's a limited supply of investors in Colombia, so that's why we believe that doing these types of things in joining together efforts with international investors and international participants is key. What we are doing from the exchange point of view is facilitating access to international investors to the Colombian marketplace, changing the regulatory framework, the tax regime for investors, but also our platforms. We're moving everything to a single platform so you can access anywhere in the world. You could access the Colombian marketplace. We're working with prime brokers internationally also to provide access and with international custodians to provide access to these investments in the local marketplace, and providing access also to international market makers if that would be the case. So we're trying to create, even though it's a small hub with few investors locally, we're trying to reach out to more investors around the world. And we will be launching in a month or so an e-platform in line with what Mr. Forero was mentioning, to allow individuals, retail investors, to deal in stocks locally. They can do it today, but the costs are very high for them to access, so it's not very readily available. But the idea is to launch a low-cost e-trading platform just in a month or so. Should be launched, giving access to individual investors. And we're also launching a sort of crowdfunding platform to fund SMEs. So we're working all of this in a digital environment, in a fintech environment, so that we'll be very low cost, very digital and scalable. And once you have that, you can invest from anywhere in the world.
Okay, I think we are finishing now, but thank you so much for being here. And
well, if I may say so, thank you all for an amazingly interesting session. It could have gone on much, much longer. Paola, I didn't thank you after your address, I should have done. Thank you, it was very energizing. And some of the comments we've heard now, I hope you panel aren't expecting to get any lunch, because you're not going to. I can see there'll be lots of people wanting to talk to you about individual ideas. But Chair Lady and panel members, can I thank you all very much for a very interesting presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great for the invitation. Thanks again for having us. And it's also amazing to have the opportunity to speak at an event that really is trying to address interest for investors in Colombia on an issue of sustainability. And the reason I think it's really important is because I think globally, the issues of sustainability, both for companies and investors, are becoming increasingly of interest. But I also think that this is becoming specifically important for some of the emerging markets, and Colombia potentially is leading on some of these issues. And therefore, I think that it fits very well to have an entire session at this conference on these issues. So I just was going to briefly, in the next 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, cover a couple things. First of all is explain what we actually mean by responsible investment. There's a lot of myths of what responsible investment is, and I think clarifying that and clarifying what is the principles for responsible investments, which is the organization I work for, is. Then I'd like to cover why we believe these are actually become so significant for companies and investors. And then the third thing is really jump in a bit and show how this is mostly relevant for countries like Colombia. So the first thing I'll cover is really going back to what the PRI and a responsible investment is. So around 13 years ago, around 50 institutional investors, primarily pension funds around the world, felt that they wanted to create an initiative, which was called Principles for Responsible Investment, to actually look at the issues of sustainability in a different way. It wasn't designed as an ethical investment solution. It was not looked at as, oh, let's save the world. It was a lot more about a group of investors that said, in a changing world, environmental, social, and corporate governance issues matter for us because we are investors for the long term. Now that's important because sometimes responsible investment is seen as, oh, I'm not going to invest in oil, or I'm not going to invest in tobacco, or I'm not going to invest in something. While some responsible investors make that choice, and it's absolutely fine for investors to choose their own ethical position, really responsible investors is about taking your fiduciary duty in the long term and making it actually part of the investment perspective. That change in thinking from this small group of investors have been critical into then developing an industry now and an initiative that has, from the 50 that started, around 2,500 institutional investors representing $86 trillion US of assets under management. So we're talking a significant portion of the financial industry is now looking at ESG from a perspective of fiduciary duties. So for companies that are looking at this, this is quite important to know where the investment community is going. And I actually think it's quite interesting to flag what the institutional investors said when they actually started the initiative, which was, as institutional investors, we have a duty to act in the best long-term interest of our beneficiaries. In this fiduciary role, we believe that environmental, social, and corporate governance issues can affect the performance of the investment portfolio. We recognize that applying these principles may better align the investor with the broader objective of society. So, yes, there's a broader objective, but this needs to go toward the benefits of our ultimate beneficiaries. So what might be interesting is then ask ourselves why so many institutional investors are looking at this. And really, this can be flagged into three main factors. The first thing is materiality. These issues are increasingly becoming not side to what it means to be an investor or what it means to run a company. Just to give you a sense on the macro scale, the World Economic Forum in the last 10 years has run a study on what are the global risks. Now, they highlight always the top 5 in terms of likelihood and the top 5 in terms of impact. 10 years ago, 3 or 4 of those were usually traditional economic factors. Today, 3 or 4 of them are traditionally climate issues or issues that have a strong social component. Income inequality, these sort of factors. So it's clear that there's a shift. And that is not only at a macro level. If you think about the individual company level, companies like BP, who remembers that BP meant, beyond petroleum? Clearly you need to walk the talk. And so in terms of, looking at these factors, there's individual cases clearly increasingly come up as factors where if you look at this, these are actually ESG issues. Facebook, VW, they're all issues about governance that have an impact on social issues, and it has a reputational issue as well. So materiality is clearly a factor, but it's not only from the risk perspective, it's also from the opportunity perspective. We're talking, the World Economic Forum it highlights that there's around 5 trillion investment shift that needs to happen to achieve the Paris Agreement. And this is not going to be the governments that are going to make these investments. Same is on the SDG, the Social Development Goals. Same figures. So clearly we have an opportunity, not only a risk tool, in looking through the lens of ESG. Now, this is all examples, but really the most interesting study that I think highlights this is Hamburg University DWS study that combines, it's a study of studies, so it looks at over 2,000 studies from the 1970s to today. So any research that they identified. And they found that 90% of these studies show either a strong positive, in the majority of cases, or a neutral impact at ESG in the performance of the companies. So companies that are looking at this better perform, and only in 10% of the cases they find the opposite. So the idea, oh, you know, ESG is some side thing that will make us actually go off track is clearly debunked from the vast majority of the academic research. So materiality is the first factor that are bringing investors to work heavily in companies on this. The second factor is the awareness and demand. I mean, you know, if you're a Londoner, you would have seen the protests just a few weeks ago that have actually blocked some of the roads and the tube. But not even only that. You know, if the student Greta from the Scandinavian countries, you probably all have seen her travel and actually had strikes around the world from students on these issues. And we're actually talking about basically increasingly the millennial generation looking at these issues in a very different way. Why does it matter? Millennials, for a Schroeder study, actually recent Schroeder study shows that millennials have around 86% are keen to have sustainability solution in their investment portfolio, 86%. In the next 10 years, $4 trillion of assets are going to shift generation, and that's what they're looking for. So again, the investors and the companies that are on top of this will be ahead in this generational shift. And it's not only individuals, institutional investors are increasingly doing this. We found that of our 2,500 investors, almost 60% of them require in their request for a proposal for asset management to have sustainability and responsible investment capability for the investment manager. So the ability to understand that. So clearly demand is a second factor. A growth in demand on these issues from the retail perspective and the institutional perspective is a very strong factor. The other thing really, and the third point, is regulation and standards. So regulation standards has been a third key driver. And you know, if we look at it globally, there's been an amazing, I mean, if you look 20 years ago, regulation on these aspects were around 10 globally. If you looked at 10 years ago, they're a little bit over 100. If you look at today, there's more than 400 initiative and institutional regulations on these issues. So clearly, the regulator is changed and has shifted its view of the importance of these issues. And this is happening globally across the world. And they're really covering three main factors, and one is the stewardship code, so how to be an active owner. So if you're an owner, how to be an active owner with your companies. So how to actually engage positively, constructively with the companies on how to progress on these issues. The second part has been around regulation on pension funds and how pension funds need to include these aspects. And the third part has really been about disclosure. So how to provide more valid data to investors about the performance of companies on ESG issues. So 3 things, the materiality the demand and the regulation have clearly shifted the global asset towards an interest on these aspects. Now, why does this matter for this conference? And I think there's a couple of reflections. First of all, for emerging markets, it's very clear that looking at, especially in an emerging market, at ESG issues is a fundamental element. The understanding of corporate governance in these countries, the understanding of the social issues that are affecting these markets, and the environmental challenges are clearly significant. Just to give you a sense, the MSCI Index of Emerging Markets, starting in, I think, May 2011, with 100, the index reaches today, in early January, around 111. The same index focused on the responsible investment, so the more the sustainability companies of the same index, is around just short of 140. So, and this has been continuous. If you look at the graph, there's almost no point in these years where that index has had, has had a lower performance. So the performance of emerging markets is clearly signaling that ESG is a critical factor in performance. The second factor about this is just to note, and I think this is an element of where the colleagues that are going to come up are going to tell a very positive story, is that the Colombian companies are particularly successful in this. In a study from Morningstar last year, Colombia came first in the entire emerging markets in terms of their performance on sustainability issues. So clearly, from a sustainability perspective, the Colombia company and the business sector has taken this very seriously, and that's why it matters. The second thing is the investors care, not only the companies. And yes, global investors are coming to this, but the emerging market investors are reacting. Just to give you a sense, in China last year, 86% of investors grew into the PRI, into our initiative. They realized that's a competitive advantage. But the second highest growing market was the Latin American market, with 64% growth. And we're talking about big investors in your markets that you will recognize, Bancolombia, Banorte, Bancomer, Bradesco, Previ, BTV Pactual, La Renvial, Moneda, Banchile, Prima, Cuprum. These are all some of the key big institutional investors that have actually looked at and taken on the PRI, the Principles for Responsible Investment. And the third thing, briefly, is the regulators. The regulators also are taking charge of this in Latin America. In Brazil, there's a number of regulations to make this a key component as part of the pension funds. In Mexico, the Afores now have an element of support in the regulators for their approach in ESG. But most importantly, in Colombia, things are starting to be looked at there as well. And in fact, the Superintendencia Financiera looked at this last year, did a survey, found that institutional investors on climate are still behind, but can be done more, and they're actually going to provide working on some guidance for this coming year. So the government is looking at this even in Colombia. So in closing, and to stick to my advice on timing, I wanted to just summarize and say, look, sustainability is a key factor for both companies and investors. Colombia is uniquely placed in a very strong point because of its performance. The panelists will actually cover what we're doing, but in a country like yours, it's a really competitive advantage, and I encourage you all to take a look. One thing that made me laugh is right before looking at this, I read an article on Colombia, and it said, Colombia agricultural sector is finding ways to make cow produce less gas. And actually, that is one of the most interesting factors of how to look at reducing methane by completely changing the way the agricultural sector is promoting some of the meat production in Colombia as a way to actually improve sustainability without necessarily remove the food or remove meat from the plate. Thank you very much, and hope you enjoy now the panelists, which have a great component.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gregg Lemos-Stein. I'll be the moderator for this very interesting panel. I'm very excited to be a part of it. Thank you to the organizers, and thank you, Lorenzo, to those introductory comments. First, I'll just very quickly introduce our very prominent panel here. To my left is Astrid Alvarez, the CEO of Grupo Energía Bogotá. Then we have Eric Flesch, the CEO of Promigas. And then Lorenzo, you've already met. And then Bernardo Vargas, the CEO of ISA, is on the end. And I think if you're not familiar with their businesses, they are very, very prominent businesses, but I think maybe in the discussion about ESG, they'll talk more about specifics. So a lot to get to. This is very exciting for me. As I said, it's an interesting time for my organization, S&P Global, because you may know us as the rating agency. We're being asked all the time to talk about ESG factors and how they affect the credit rating. So we're responding to that by publishing sections in all of our reports, about 500 to date, but it will be up to 2,000 eventually, specifically on ESG factors and how companies like the ones we have on our panel are responding to those factors and in some cases turning them into opportunities. So in a way, the questions that I'll be asking are the questions that the analysts from my company are asking CEOs and CFOs all over the world, in Colombia, Australia, everywhere, because this is such a global phenomenon. So being able to articulate on this topic is very, very, very important for us and extremely timely. So without further ado, I will launch right into the questions, and I'll start with Astrid.
Yeah, well, thank you.
So Astrid, I guess the basic question would be, what are key examples of ESG risks or factors that play a prominent role in your business and that are important for your success over the coming years?
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. First of all, we are considering many factors, but I think it's very important for me to tell you there are two main factors that we are working on. First is the culture. If you don't change the culture inside of your companies, there is no way you can see in a very good way the ESG factors, how they impact the business where you operate. So the culture, how we change that. Even though we have some technical competencies, in order to develop our roles in finance roles or legal role or social role, we do have a characteristic of our culture. We have adopted a characteristic and it is called social sensitivity. Social sensitivity, and in the beginning, it was sound really weird, especially for the finance people. But what we declare as a companies, if we do not have the social sensibility where we operate, so how are we gonna last forever? How are we gonna maintain our businesses where we operate? So that social sensibility, it has a lot of compounds. I'm gonna tell you about just two. First of all, just to understand the context where we work. If you understand the social, political, and ethnical and cultural context where you work, so that's the main point to beginning with in an engagement, a real engagement. And we declare in our policy is like, I'm gonna say it in Spanish, relacionamiento genuino con las comunidades. This is a real engagement with the community, to understand the community. And the second is to focus our projects in a real economic growth. As our President Duque says, if we focus in the economic growth, in the projects that really will give you the economic growth to those rural areas, it will give us a real engagement with the communities. So those are the two factors. And I should say that our main projects are located in rural areas of Guatemala, Peru, and Colombia. That's why it's a big challenge for us, because it's not the big city where you have all the resources. We are located in so many rural areas of Colombia, especially.
Thank you, Astrid. You touched on a related question, which is how you build that sustainability culture. Are there any particular examples that you'd like to share of that?
Definitely we have, and I am very motivated for this. I was telling them because this is one of the main, of course, I have to talk about the dividends, I have to talk about my shareholders, but this subject, I think, really motivates me to work in my company. One of the programs that we have is Energy for Peace. And Energy for Peace, it was created 2 years ago in a project where we have demined more than 200 kilometers, not only operational demining, but humanitarian demining. And we did it because we needed to engage the community in order not only to implement the project of transmission lines, but to construct a really good engagement with the community. First, we demine. Second, we train the community. More than 1,400 people are trained to be for the process of demining, to lowering the risk of demining, because of course we demine at 2,000 hectares, but still there are some places that are probably with some landmines. And the third that we did, that it was training the teachers, because the teachers and the kids had to be trained in order to come back to school. So in education, we have one of the projects, but the other project is in economic growth. So we are seeking some productive growth. Even though here we are seeking for some responsibility investors. If here we have some, please raise your hand, I'm gonna talk to you. But we want to really have some investors to work with economic projects that we are developing in the area. So those are the two main projects that we're doing in Energy for Peace. More than 200 kilometers, where the FARC, the guerrilla, was installed in Cañón de las Hermosas 50 years ago. So we are in a very privileged area where the guerrilla was started, but we have a big challenge in order to take out those communities. More than 200 veredas, more than 25 rural sites that we have diagnosed, and more than 11 municipalities. So we have a big challenge with GEB in this project.
Thank you, Astrid. Thank you for the specifics.
Thank you.
Very compelling story. Eric Flesch, turning to you, what are some factors that jump to mind for you and for Promigas's future?
Thank you, Gregg. In our company, we focus on the social area in 2 or 3 main things. First, education. Education for us is the platform to develop any country or any town. So we have a foundation where this foundation invests per year around $2.5 million in education for people who are in the area of influence where our pipeline goes through. So that money, that amount of money, in some way influences on over 150,000 students per year. And then we see how towns can develop year after year. So that's one. Second, when we see any possibility to bring the distribution pipelines to some small towns from the main pipeline, we do so. We are aware about improving the quality of life of the people in Colombia. Colombia right now, the connections in gas are about 85%, covers about 85% of the population. Still, there are some rural areas where people don't have even electricity or gas to cook. So we are aware just how to improve the quality of life of the people. Third, we care about offering jobs to the area of influence when we are building a project. So we normally, any basic job where people are available, those guys have always the preference. This is on the social side. On the environment side, we are introducing our company toward photovoltaic energies, so solar panels energies. Right now, we already have through one of our distribution companies 8 megawatts, and then we are working to see how to expand our business. And also, we want to promote and foster more the use of gas for vehicles. In Colombia, the amount of vehicles with gas is still very small. It's around 700,000 vehicles. So still there is a big room to go. And last, on the corporate governance, we work hard, as Astrid was saying, on the culture. on the processes, on the controls, on the ethics. We have the committees to ensure, that works very smoothly in the company.
So if I could just ask a follow-up to that. So you have the processes, the internal committees, but how do you transmit that externally beyond, telling stories and like a forum like this or rankings? Like, how do you transmit what you're doing to the investor community?
Well, we have the committees. We have 3 types of committees where the directors of the board are part of them, and we build together those policies, and then that's the way we build together, policies and compliances to transmit to the investors.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Eric. Lorenzo, I'm going to skip, and I'm going to come back to you. Bernardo. So similar question for your organization at ISA. Anything you'd like to share in terms of the ESG risks or opportunities that you face?
Well, thank you very much, Gregg. Well, in our I was just asked a question today, being in this panel, to see if they could look up in my website the sustainability report. And I said, we do not have a sustainability report. So they said, wow, why don't you? You're going to talk about ESG? And I said, no, because it's completely integrated to my report. So at ISA, we have just one report. Sustainability and profitability come hand in hand. We cannot separate it one from the other. So that's a first statement that I want to make here. Second, ISA is a paradox because even though it's a company that still has mixed ownership with government, it is the leader in corporate governance in Colombia. We have been awarded the prize that's given in Colombia for this purpose over all the other private sector companies 3 years in a row. And it is, in terms of transparency, one of the leaders there. As part of that, we're part of the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. We're part of the FTSE for Good. We're part of the MILA indexes. So all this is a result of being very clear and very present in this. We have, of course, as my colleagues here at the panel put forward, several plans to do that. I want to point out one of them, which is the reason I have a monkey in my lapel here. And this is a program called Jaguar Connection, where we're protecting the environment, we're neutralizing 9 million tons of CO2. We're working with local poor communities in the countries that we have presence, Brazil, Peru, Chile, and Colombia, where we work with them to reorganize forests that have been devastated by illegal mining or illegal forestry. And at the same time, we're protecting the jaguar, the Latin American jaguar, which is one of the key names in Latin America biodiversity. I think with the anaconda and the condor is being, we have about 60,000 individuals in the region, and 3,000 to 4,000 are being killed every year. So we're protecting the jaguar, and by looking at the jaguar, we protect this monkey here. We have 150 of those left in Colombia, and a bird called the paujil of Blue Peak, which they think there's only 10 left. So we are focusing on that. We're doing the G part well, and we think socially we touch upon 150 million people in Latin America. So we're very present there with several other programs as well.
And Bernardo, as we were talking earlier, before we got on the podium, we talked about building the culture. You had some comments as well about how that.
With everything that has to do from ethics to sustainability, it cannot be just words. It has to be embedded in our culture. And we changed things in the past few years. We changed our logo. We changed the long mission, vision statements to just 3 words: connections that inspire. So we have people in our 4,000 employees are thinking about inspiring other people. And this has affected directly our measurement, which is a yearly measurement of internal climate in the company, bringing it up from 72 from 0 to 100, which is the average in Colombia, to about 84 on average in all countries that we're present in. This is a Hay Group Korn Ferry survey every year, and we're now around 84, 86 in all of our countries, which is in every country one of the leading companies there. And let me just say, last but not least, that also we are measured by Transparency International. And there we rank as well as one of the top companies in Colombia. Mixed ownership, so paradox, but that's reality. It can be done.
Thank you, thank you. Lorenzo, one of the things I found most interesting in your comments was the fact that Colombia is really in a leadership position with respect to ESG initiatives. And we have three companies that are at the forefront, maybe even within Colombia. But I guess in terms of, again, that connection to external stakeholders, what is PRI doing to assist that effort, and what would be the next step for companies to undertake to communicate with the markets?
Yeah, so as an organization, we try to support both. We work primarily with the investors, but we try to also support the investors to work with companies. And, you know, for example, taking about Colombia, we felt strongly that given the potential of the country to look at these issues, working with the 30% investors in the stock market, which is what we already do, was not enough. So we actually opened up operations in Medellin. So we actually have now people in Medellin supporting local investors directly to engage with companies on the sustainability issues. And, you know, and so it's about giving them, you know, for us it's important to give the local and global investors the tools to actually understand how to look at these issues and how to dialogue with the companies on it. And one of the platforms we provide is also a collaborative platform where investors can come together and as a group engage with the companies on the issues, and that usually has a benefit for the investors because there's an exchange of information and knowledge, et cetera. But there's also a benefit for the companies that don't have to speak to 50 investors on one issue, but kind of create one dialogue and one platform on the issue. So that's some of the things that we're hoping to help specifically in Colombia.
Great, thank you. Actually, I'll open it to any of the CEOs. If you'd like to comment on the role of the board of directors in this and your relationship and how that's evolved, perhaps in recent years, if any of you'd like to comment on that.
Very briefly, on our case, board of directors is completely involved with this, completely involved. And they're, you know, every board meeting, we touch upon what we're doing there, and they're, you know, part of the reporting responsibility to the board has to do with that, and that's key. And I imagine my partners would say that as well.
Astrid?
Yes. We do have 99 members of the board of directors. 6 of them are independents. All of the committees are led by the independent members. But we have 2 committees that are really following this subject. We have a corporate governance committee that will see all the governance of the whole company, even though these committees see all the evaluations of the committees within the committees. And the board of directors it will check and it will follow all the processes inside of the company. So we'll check that. And then the other committee, the auditing and risk committee, with the risk, we follow their subject too. And but I just want to make one point. I think the challenge that we have, because we do a lot of things, and we've been doing a lot of social responsibility, but now we're changing, you know, the way we are doing that. But I think the challenge that we have is how to monitor and how to follow those indicators, you know, inside, in the field, and how the communities are really engaged. I think this is the challenge, because all these companies, we have all these qualifications, you know, Dow Jones Sustainability, so many qualifications. But I think the communities, they really are the one who have to qualify us. And that's why we're working for. Because if the communities really want to work with GEB in the projects, that's the way I think we believe we're going to be successful.
In our case, the board of directors is very involved beyond the strategy of the company on the ESG principles. And we all together care about welfare of our people, preservation of the environment, support to communities. So we build all together with the board. It's embedded, it's part of, you know, the company, and we just move down all those principles in all the different levels of the organization. And on the other hand, we have 3 different committees which are composed by directors of the board. One of them is the Ethics, Audit, and Corporate Governance Committee. The second one is regarding investments and strategy. And the third one is compensation, nomination, and people. So it's a close work between the management and the board.
Okay. I wish we had more time. I have time for one more quick question, but then I think we'll take a few from the audience. The one question, maybe it's not an easy one to answer, but how do you, or have you started managing or thinking about the supply chain in all of this? Because I think you have a level of sophistication and awareness of these issues, but maybe your supply chain might be much more complicated to look through. So I'll open to any of you who'd like to comment on that and how you set the tone.
Well, we do have a strong supply chain processes that we've been implemented, but one of the points, because we follow different points of indicators of the suppliers, but one of the main points that we follow through is the safety. Mm-hmm. Safety for us is first life. So first life is any life, contractor's life, all the lives that are around our operations. So this is the one committee we have implemented with the suppliers, with the legal representation of the supplier, not with the manager. So we have these meetings inside of the different projects, mm-hmm. and if the supplier has failure for anything or wants to share with us an experience, they go to the President's Committee, to the GEB. So any supplier of Guatemala, Peru, or Colombia, they will go to our committee, my committee, and they will present the case or they will present the experience. So they have a space in the process of the President's Committee.
Okay, thank you for that. I think anything to add there? Or?
Well, two very quick answers to that. First is that the executive compensation at ISA is affected by accidents or security accidents, but of our subcontractors, which their personnel does not depend on directly on us. So in that respect, the contracts that we have with them are very clear that they have to meet requirements that are key for us because our compensation is affected. And number two, the second way to do it is example. We just issued the first New York issued dollar-based bond in Latin America that was green with Energía Bogotá in our companies where we are partners with in Peru. $400 million, 4.5 times oversubscribed. And the book that was built, given that it was a green bond, was much more profound than a normal book. So that's an example to our suppliers and the people that work for us. Great. As well.
Thank you, Bernardo. Are there any questions from the audience? I think we have time for one or two. Don't ask where's lunch. Let's have a better question than that. I think we have one in the back. Thank you. We know you're hungry.
Thank you. This is Margarita Casas from PwC. We know that the Colombian supervisor is one of the 36 supervisors on central banks that are recommending to follow the TCFD guidelines for reporting on climate-related disclosures. So basically my question for you is, if your companies are foreseeing to follow those recommendations in the future?
Sorry. Yes.
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 I mean, of course.
Pretty clear answer there. Do we have other questions?
There is no option.
No.
Another question from the audience?
I think they're all hungry.
I think they are hungry. Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure for me. I wish we had more time, and thank you.